The old saying is true. Nobody gets out of this world alive. Some of us just survive it longer than others. And for Gary Rossington, a founding member of Lynyrd Skynyrd, well, he survived a lot longer than most, and at times seemed to have had a guardian angel who fought alongside of him on many occasions. Gary had just barely turned a teenager when he started playing in the neighborhood band that would become known as Lynyrd Skynyrd. Ronnie Van Zant, who would become the leader of that band, was almost 3 years older than Gary and already had a reputation of someone who liked to drink and fight. So you add that to rock music and you're on a path of life that many either get out early of or die trying. Gary did neither. He stayed the course and survived. So stick around and find out just how he did it. He was born Gary Robert Rossington on December 4, 1951 in Jacksonville, Florida. His father passed away when Gary was very young, and he was raised up by his mother Bernice, who he became very close to and would even name his famous 59 Les Paul after her. In the early years, Gary started to pick up odd jobs and even pick up soda bottles to cash in to save up his money, and finally he had enough to get him a Silvertone guitar and small amp. Once he had the guitar, him, his friend Bob Burns, a drummer, and Larry Johnstrom, who played bass, started a band. Gary said all they needed to do now was learn how to play. After meeting up for a jam with singer Ronnie Van Zant and another guitarist, Alan Collins, the groundwork was set and the path was chosen for Gary's life. The band named My Backyard was formed in 1964, and after a few name changes, it would become Lynyrd Skynyrd in 1969, and it would be a part of Gary until his death in 2023. Along with all the great times, also came some very tough times. Probably one of the first times Gary survived a near career-ending injury was in Germany while on tour in 1975. Called the Bloodbath in Hamburg, Gary was very fortunate to come out of that one with the use of his hands, although he always felt some numbness and tingling in them after the incident. Known for many drunken and drug-induced battles before and after shows, this one has to rank near the top in Lynyrd Skynyrd lore. The band arrived in the German city on October 14, 1975, where their European tour was due to kick off the following night. All was fine until they hit the hotel bar. Gary said, "We drank beer and whiskey every night, scotch or Jack Daniels, sometimes champagne. But the guy at the hotel bar gave us some cold peppermint schnapps. We'd never seen that, never even heard of schnapps. They had the glasses all frozen. It tasted good, so we were really knocking them back." After drinking at the bar, they headed back to their rooms to get some much-needed rest after that long flight over. But unfortunately for everyone else, Ronnie Van Zant was trashed and he decided he needed to fight. So now this is nothing new to the band, but that night Ronnie was ready to take it to a new level. He was so drunk, Gary recalled, he started a fight with somebody. I think it was our road manager. A couple of us was trying to get him off, and then he took this bottle and busted it on the head of our tour manager and broke. You got to hit somebody pretty damn hard to break a bottle, and it knocked our tour manager crazy, so he was bleeding some. And then out of nowhere, Ronnie turned on Gary and said, "I'm going to cut your hands. You're never going to play guitar again." And he proceeded to carve both of Gary's hands up with the busted bottle. Maybe Gary's guardian angel was there, or maybe she came in the form of drummer Artemis Pyle. Gary said, "My hands were bleeding pretty bad, and I remember Artemis coming in really mad. He was an ex-Marine and in great shape, and he had a wild streak too. He was throwing Ronnie around. Artemis finally got him on the bed and was on top of him, cussing him out and yelling. It was crazy, man." With Pyle and the rest of the band restraining Ronnie, Gary and fellow guitarist Alan Collins headed for the nearest emergency room. The two musicians, neither of who spoke German, tried to get across the severity of what had happened to the doctors, who were attempting to stop the bleeding and stitch up Gary's wounds. "I was trying to say, this is important. I play with my hands. But they did it real good, I guess," Gary said. In the end, Gary ended up with 10 stitches in one hand, 11 in the other. But when he got back to the hotel, he found Ronnie in less than a contrite mood. Rather than offering an apology, Ronnie told Gary to catch the first flight home tomorrow. Gary just said nah, and that was it. He did make the show that took place the night after the bloodbath, with both hands bandaged and unable to play all but the most basic licks. And the following year, on Labor Day weekend of 1976, Gary and Alan Collins were both involved in separate car wrecks in their hometown of Jacksonville. Alan hit a parked Volkswagen and knocked it across an empty parking lot. That was just a fender bender compared to Gary's, Ronnie Van Zant said. 10 years later, Alan Collins wouldn't be so fortunate the next time he had a wreck. Now, what I find ironic about Gary's car wreck, which ended up putting him in the hospital and causing Skynyrd to cancel their upcoming tour, was Ronnie Van Zant, who the year before tried to amputate both of Gary's hands with a whiskey bottle, said, "I can't tell you how mad I got at him for wrecking that car." Ronnie even fined Gary $5,000 for the incident. Why? For drinking and driving? Because it caused them to miss the tour? Whatever the reason, it just seems very ironic to me that Ronnie could straight-faced say he was mad about it and fine Gary. Oh well, I guess that's life in the Lynyrd Skynyrd band. Then the following year was a plane crash, October of 1977. Gary survived that, but again, he had to have someone looking out for him. I think Gary was one of the worst injured that lived through that awful crash. He had both legs, arm, wrist, and feet broken, as well as a broken pelvis bone and ribs and a few punctured organs. But he survived. Sadly, though, the band, with the loss of Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, and his sister Cassie, who was a backup singer, would never be the same. It took Gary and some of the others a few years to recover from the plane crash. Once he did, him and Alan Collins tried to put a band back together. They got bass player Leon Wilson and piano player Billy Powell on board and decided to use a female backup singer from 38 Special named Dale Kranz. They billed it as the Rossington Collins Band, and it debuted in 1980 with the Anytime, Anyplace, Anywhere album, which went on to sell 1 million copies. Things were starting to look up a little, but the second album release didn't do so well, and there were problems in the band. Alan Collins' wife died during a miscarriage, and Alan was never really the same after that. Gary and singer Dale Kranz fell in love, got married, and retired to a log house in the Grand Teton Mountains to relax and raise a family. So for a few years, Gary just rested and recuperated from it all. Looking back on his early years playing, Gary created and played on some of the most iconic songs in rock history. Some of these songs and guitar riffs are timeless. The slide intro to Freebird will always be my favorite. Keep in mind here, when this song was written in 1970, Gary was only 18 or 19 years old. What Gary had to say about the writing and recording of Freebird is this. Around 1970, when we wrote the song, I had just started playing slide. Alan Collins had these chords, but Ronnie couldn't figure out any melody or lyrics to go with them. We kept playing the chords over and over until Ronnie figured out some lyrics, and I came up with the slide part. But when I played, the bottle kept clinking against the frets because the strings were too low. I took a screwdriver of all things and stuck it under the strings up at the nut, so that it raised the strings up like a steel guitar. Then I tuned the B string down to G, so the G and B strings were both tuned to G. With the two Gs, it creates a drawling double sound. He said he always stuck something under the strings while playing the song live, not because he had to, but just because he wanted to. When the tribute band was formed in the fall of 1987, Gary was there. It was the 10-year anniversary of the plane crash, and it was only supposed to run for a year. But it was such a hit with the Skynyrd fans that it still goes today. As Gary aged, his body, which had suffered some massive injuries, also started showing the effects of the smoking, alcohol, and painkiller consumption through the years. He started having heart issues. He went through a quintuple bypass and had some stents put in, and a couple of heart attacks and a few strokes to top it off. These issues started forcing Gary to miss shows, and even at the gigs he was able to perform, he often had to sit out a portion of the set, handing the guitar duties over to Damon Johnson. He admitted he went through a lot of different emotions watching Lynyrd Skynyrd from the side of the stage. The notes are the same, the songs are the same. It sounds good to me. It sounds like our band, he explained. I look out and don't see the original band. It's strange. And then I look out and see a replacement for me, which is strange. Just hearing the songs without me playing on them live is very strange. Gary said he is ultimately happy Lynyrd Skynyrd's music still connects with people. To see the young people enjoy it makes your heart warm, he said. That feeling is one Gary believes his former bandmates would share. He said, "Me, Alan, and Ronnie started this band with the dream of making it big. And that dream came true. They'd love it if their music was still being played when they're gone." And now, Gary's gone, and the music is still being played. Gary Rossington died at his home in Milton, Georgia on March 5th, 2023, at the age of 71. He was married to his wife Dale for over 40 years. No cause of death was given, but all you have to do is look back on his life to figure that out. How he survived that long, I'll never know. But the thing I do know is, Gary is the ultimate survivor of that band.